let's start off with introduction of what NetSuite is, how it came into existence, and why is it, as recommended by your husband as well, why it is one of the good career options as well. NetSuite is a true cloud ERP. When I say a true cloud ERP, it was never meant to be on a on-premise software. It was always meant to be on cloud from day one, since it started a decade ago or more than that as well. Uh, so the story behind Oracle or NetSuite basically coming into existence was, there was one of the employees at Oracle with the name Zach Nelson, who approached the owner of Oracle stating that he has an idea in his mind and he wants to develop it. So Larry Ellison, who is the owner of Oracle, mentioned that I will not basically take up your idea at this moment, but I can fund your idea. So you quit Oracle, you go outside in the market and develop your own product. For that, I will basically give you funds. There were two employees simultaneously who had brought up idea. The one was Zach Nelson and there was the other one. And both of them set out in the market and established their own companies. Those companies respectively are known as NetSuite and Salesforce as of date. So Larry Ellison initially basically funded the entire development and product development basically. And Zach Nelson basically launched it as NetLedger initially. And slowly and steadily, as it basically got into newer features, newer markets, it is now known as NetSuite. NetSuite is a true cloud ERP. It was never meant to be on-premise. When I say on-premise, you could relate it to these large ERPs which this corporation has, such as the SAPs of the world, basically, which requires on-site servers and technical teams to make sure that the servers are up and running, and all the users could basically punch in their transactions as well. So on-premise softwares basically requires servers to be there, hard disks to be there where your data are stored, and also a technical team who basically make sure that these servers are up and running. And at any point in time, they have to make sure that the maintenance of the servers are happening, and ensure they also assure that you are able to enter those transactions or log in into your softwares. Many a times it happens that you try to log in into your software and it gives you certain errors because the servers are under maintenance, for example, and then your technical team do also either rectifies it or informs you beforehand that the servers are going to be down for the maintenance activities XYZ. So the basic idea behind formulation of NetSuite was that it should be a cloud-based ERP. It should be an end-to-end implementation, not only catering to a specific segment of the business requirement. For example, Salesforce, it caters to your CRM activities. It more or less caters to your CRM activities. It's not an end-to-end ERP. When I say end-to-end ERP, that end-to-end ERP has to cater to all the requirements of your business, whether it's sales, whether it's purchase, inventory, manufacturing, fixed assets, CRM, support. All these things has to be catered by a one single software, which is then called as end-to-end ERP. Salesforce is a kind of an ERP which targets one of your processes, which is CRM, for example. But NetSuite caters to basically all the processes that are basically required by any businesses to perform their operations on a day-to-day basis. Now, again, why cloud? Basically, there were problems with having on-premise ERPs, on-premise servers and softwares as well, because first of all, it was a very costly affair. Implementing SAP is way too costly. You also need to procure the software, you need to procure the hardware, and you also need to maintain a huge technical team to make sure that your servers are up and running every time. Now, with NetSuite, all these costs were eliminated. You need not pay for the hardware. You need not purchase any sort of hardware to basically log in into NetSuite. You are not required to maintain a huge technical team to make sure that the servers are up and running. And so those costs are eliminated. And NetSuite is a service-based ERP. So it's kind of a subscription-based ERP, sorry. So as long as you keep on paying your subscription, your NetSuite is live, up and running. So similarly, it is SaaS, software as a subscription or a software as a service, basically. And hence, you see that once these all huge costs were eliminated, uh, all organizations started affording to have an end-to-end ERP, an ERP like NetSuite, which is a cloud-based ERP supported from the US and having servers all over the globe. And it is as good as you pay your subscription, as good as you log into your Facebook. You have your login credentials and password. Similarly, you get login credentials and password to Oracle NetSuite. You go to their website, put in your credentials, boom, you logged in into NetSuite. Right? It is as simple as that. The only thing that is required by NetSuite to be up and running is you require a browser. That browser can be on your phone, tablet, MacBook, PC, desktop, and an active internet. So there's only two things which are necessary for you to log in into NetSuite is a browser and an active internet. That's it. You can basically log in from anywhere across the globe, and you can basically perform your daily transactions as you would do sitting in front of your desktop as well. Okay. So that was a brief history about what Oracle NetSuite is and what a cloud-based ERP basically does for you, and how it has basically become a cost-efficient way to have an end-to-end ERP. And that is the reason NetSuite has been growing with that particular pace, and it has been considered as most sought-over software across the globe as well. And that is the true success of NetSuite. I will take a pause here. If you have any questions, if you have any doubts, you could ask me, and then we can move forward as well. Hello?
Yeah, I've got one. So I've gone through the material a little, not gone through, but I've kind of read, is it the first chapter? I think the one that talks about, okay, I read it quite a while ago, but it focused a lot into accounting
Yes.
stuff. So do I need to have an accounting background to succeed in this course?
I would suggest you should have at least I mean, I will also basically make sure that I give you input from an accounting perspective as well, while I basically let you know the transactions. But the most important piece to be successful in any ERP, there are two career lines in an ERP. Okay, one is you're on the implementation side. I work for an implementation team who basically sells NetSuite, and then we go ahead, take requirements, and implement NetSuite for the client. The other line of career is that I am at a client's place where ERP is implemented, and I make sure that the implementation goes good. After the implementation is done, I make sure that I work as an administrator for NetSuite. I work for a company where NetSuite has been implemented, and I make sure that all small requirements, all small changes are taken care, and I work as a NetSuite administrator at a client's place. So these are the two career lines basically, who anyone can sort once they basically know NetSuite. Now, regarding your question about having accounting knowledge, the most important thing that anyone requires to be successful in an ERP as an implementer is basically having a logical mind. You should basically, put logics together. If the customer is explaining you his own business process or a use case, we should put our logics together and understand what is their current use case, how it is mapped, and how that can be mapped inside NetSuite as well. So first and foremost is basically having a logical mind to think through that what is the customer demanding, what is that we can provide, and if there is a gap in between. Second thing, of course, as you mentioned, accounting is important, right? But you will get a hang of accounting as and when you start doing transactions more and more in the system. So you will get a hang of all those accounting impacts as well, because ultimately any organization opts for an ERP with a very basic and single purpose, is that they should be able to pull out financial reports from the system, because at the end of the year, every management requires financial reports based upon which they are going to pay taxes to the local governments that they are working with, right? So ultimate aim of any ERP is first of all to streamline the processes. Second thing, to avoid any gaps that are coming between. Third, to make sure that everything is on time and there are no delays in it. Fourth is to basically have the entire data in an ERP which can be analyzed and corrective or preventive measures can be taken beforehand if the data basically gives us those red signals where we need to put our more energies and focus, right? So if the data is there in the system, we can basically pull out analytical reports, which will give you those red flags, and then you can take corrective and preventive measures. And the last is basically to have the entire reporting coming out of an software so that you are also aware what is the health status of your organization. And you could also basically file taxes and returns, which is of utmost importance, because if you don't file your taxes and returns, you won't be able to continue with your business in any countries as such, basically. So accounting knowledge is will be required, but it is as and when you start entering those transactions, as and when you basically get a hang of those transactions, the more you practice, the more it will be stable in the coming days as well. So it's not necessary that we need to take up an accounting course to understand it, but if you have that logical mind of what happens when I'm doing a sale, so which accounts or which kind of general ledger should be impacted. If we could basically understand it from a logic perspective as well, that is sufficient and enough at this moment, I would say.
Okay.
Okay. So then we can now jump into NetSuite. Basically, this is the landing page. I have an administrator role at this moment. So these are the different roles that individual can have. And I mean, there are n number of roles that you can create. Now, I being on the implementation side or I being on the administrator side, I have multiple instances and roles associated to me. But NetSuite is a role-based ERP. When I say role-based, we can relate it back to your career as well, where you have been a support executive or a support manager, that you have been into the support, taking up cases, solving them, and then getting back to the customer, so on and so forth. So every every ERP has roles associated to it. There will be a support executive, a support manager, a support HOD, for example, and every role has their own duties to be performed. Every role has their own transactions to be performed in the system, and they have the permission and access levels according to the roles that are assigned to them. Right. So in an organization, there might be n number of roles. For example, a CEO, a CFO, a finance HOD, a sales HOD, an accounting HOD, a procurement HOD, then the managers, then the executives, then the interns, and every role basically has certain set of duties to be performed on a daily basis. Every role has an level of access to the system, because, for example, I am a support executive, right? I will not have access to the financial data in the system. That access lies with the CFO, because they are more using that particular data, and that data is relevant to them as well. So there is a concept as need to know basis, right? So you will be provided with that much of information which you require to perform your daily activities. You will not be bombarded with unnecessary information, right, which is of no use to you or which is confidential to the company as well. So there is this need to know concept, and based upon the need to know basis, you're only the entire data that lies in an ERP is segmented and segregated in such a way that you only get access to certain data sets in the ERP which are required for you to perform your daily basis activities, and you're not bombarded with unnecessary data and certain data which is confidential to the organization as well. Right. So because large corporations, imagine a corporation like Apple Inc., right, which is mostly doing business under 192 countries which are listed under United Nations. So they must be having their own huge ERPs implemented. That ERP will be getting data from all over the world in each and every minute and second. Now, and a person who is, for example, doing certain activities in Apple Inc. need not have access to those huge bytes of data that is coming from all over the countries, but he might be requiring access to, for example, the country from which he is operating, and the operations that he is performing. For example, he might be a sales rep running his operations in United Kingdom. So he might only get access to the data which is being fed in from United Kingdom, and then to all those leads, prospects that he's basically creating in the system. So your data sets are also segregated based upon the access and the roles that you have in the system. Okay, so right now I have multiple roles and multiple this year, but generally in the live world, every user will have every user will have only one role associated to it, because we are hired for that particular purpose. I might be the CFO, I might be the sales executive, I might be the sales manager. So based upon my hiring and the activities that I need to do, I will be granted an access in NetSuite accordingly. Okay, so once a NetSuite instance is allocated to any client, right? For example, I am an organization. I was looking for an ERP. I finalized NetSuite. I bought out NetSuite. Now NetSuite is bought. We have the implementation team as well, right? Because there is two ways. One, Oracle NetSuite sells the software, right? You need to subscribe to their services. Second, you also need to have an implementation team who will basically take up requirements from me and configure the system as per my requirements, and I would basically go live in the system. Now, having said that, there are a few features of NetSuite as well. As we say that NetSuite is a ready-to-use software. So if I have worked into an IT industry and I know how data tables or how data has to be imported into the system, right? With minimum information that I have, I can basically import my customers, vendors, items, the accounting information in the system, and I can start entering transactions as well. So that is as good as ready to use software. But having said that, you can also have way too complex processes designed in the system as well. And that's where the implementation team is required, because every business has its own USP. Every business has its own set of transactions, set of processes, set of users that needs to be configured in the system. And hence, an implementation partner is more or less always required. Once you choose NetSuite as your ERP, you would basically have to have an implementation partner along with you, so that you could also get the ERP implemented in your organization and you can go live on NetSuite as well. Okay, so then once an ERP is bought out, the first and foremost information that is collected and created inside NetSuite. Okay, before that, Gabriel, I just have one quick question. How much time do you have for training today? Is it 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours? So I could, visualize what all we need to cover for today's session.
I think it's 2.5 hours I get every Saturday.
And what about Sundays?
No Sunday, just once a week, Saturday, 2.5 hours.
Okay, fine. Okay, so I guess that's a good amount of time where we can cover much more things in that case, because we have straight 2.5 hours with us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we might be required to take a 5 minutes of break in between in that case, because it will be little bit of taxing to continuously talk for 2.5 hours, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, sure. Okay, so then once we basically get a new project where NetSuite has to be implemented, the first and foremost information that we basically try to collect and configure in the system are classifications. You see setup company classifications on your screen?
Yes.
Yes. So what are these classifications? There are 4 standard classifications of NetSuite: subsidiaries, departments, locations, and classes. I will explain you every bit in detail and why are these classifications important as well. So let me just open up these: setup company and classifications, right? So what are these classifications as such, right? Classifications are data segmentation tools, right? As I mentioned to you, that consider a large organization like Apple, who might be doing business across 192 countries, and they might be receiving data or transactions being entered into their ERP day in, day out, every second. There's a whole lot of thousands and millions of transactions being entered in their ERP. So that entire set of transactions needs to be segregated and segmented accordingly. Otherwise, if it is basically just collating those millions of transactions, it will be very difficult for someone to analyze those transactions, right? So, for example, we are doing business in 192 nations, millions of transactions being created in the ERP on a daily basis. First and foremost is that those should be segregated according to the countries from where the transactions are coming, right? So we
Yep.
must be having our legal entities created in all these countries, right? Apple is doing business in US. It has Apple Inc. as an established entity in the United States of America. Apple might be doing business in United Kingdom. They must have an legal entity established in United Kingdom as well. Apple doing business in India, they will have their entity being registered in India as well, right? So every corporation has to create those legal entities where they are basically doing the business, right? These legal entities or the companies are called as subsidiaries inside NetSuite. So NetSuite also allows you, this is a very powerful tool where I could subscribe to NetSuite, right? As an Apple, I could subscribe to NetSuite, and then I can use the same instance, same NetSuite ERP, right, across all my legal entities, which might be in the same country. For example, Apple having multiple companies, right, in United States of America only, and Apple might also have companies across the globe, across continents, across countries as well. Because Apple is not only into manufacturing of mobiles and AirPods and all those stuffs, but they're also into softwares. They're also into these 3D movies, because Steve Jobs went ahead and created much more companies when he was not associated with Apple as well. So there are many companies which are listed under the parent group as Apple as well. So to define the subsidiary structure inside NetSuite, I would say that NetSuite allows you to basically have your entire businesses, right, from a single country. So as I mentioned, Apple might have multiple legal entities created in the in US only, or it would basically have legal entities created across the globe with continents and countries as well. So NetSuite allows you to create all these legal entities, whether belonging to the same country or belonging to multiple countries and continents, in the same software only. So I need not go ahead and start, purchasing different softwares for different different countries and companies. I could basically map the entire world in NetSuite only, and that is called a one world version of NetSuite. When I say one world version, it basically allows you to create multiple subsidiaries. Subsidiaries are all your legal entities and companies, right? It allows you to create multiple subsidiaries in one instance, which might be in the same country or different countries, and it might be doing the same type of business, or it might be doing different type of businesses as well, right? So this is a very important terminology, because NetSuite in that sense allows organizations and corporations to have one single ERP which can be implemented in their own country, in other countries, and for all those companies which might be doing the same kind of business, or they might be doing different kind of businesses as well. Right? Do you have any questions on the subsidiaries? Because I will of course get into the details of why subsidiaries and how a subsidiary is being created in the system. But the definition that I've given you around subsidiaries, do you have any questions associated to it at this moment?
No, I do not.
Okay, fine. So then this is about the most powerful tool of NetSuite, which is called subsidiaries. I will just go one step back to classifications here. What are classifications? As I mentioned, classifications are data segmentation tools. You need to segment your data, because no one is going to analyze millions of transactions coming from all over the globe. It needs to be segmented, and it needs to be, diverted to proper individuals. Because, for example, the sales rep sitting in United States of America will not be interested in the sales data that is coming from Philippines, for example, or the data that is coming from Dubai, for example, right? He's only concerned with the data of sales that is coming from United States of America. So as I mentioned, it is always important to segment or segregate your data and to pass on that data to the concerned individuals. No one should basically be looking at the data that they should not be looking at, or which is irrelevant to them as well. And that is the main focus of any of those ERPs which are there in the market. Now, data segmentation tools or classifications, if I could give you a real life example, right? We use data segmentation tools and classifications as an individuals, you and me, right? Use them on a daily basis. It's just that we have not thought through in that particular way. For example, if you read books, you pick up any of those books, right? It might be a 400 pages book, it might be a 200 pages book, or it might be a 1,000 pages book as well. But it always has a table of contents towards the start of the book, right? And why is that? Because, for example, if tomorrow I have to read a specific chapter, how would I find something from that 400 pages of book, right? And hence this table of contents makes my life easy. It basically tells me that there are, say, 10 chapters in this entire book, which is of 400 pages, and it also gives me the exact page number from where a specific chapter starts, right? So this is nothing but your data segmentation tools. The entire data that is there in those 400 pages, right? It has been segmented into 10 different chapters, and that book also allows me in the first page itself to make sure that from which page number to which page number what chapters are covered. So that makes the life of the reader very easy, right? If I'm reading the book for the first time, no issues. I'm going to start from the first page to the last page. But if I'm referring the book, say again next 2 months or a month or a week as well, I'm not going to start from first page to the last page. I'm going to specifically refer something from a specific chapter, right? If there is no pagination, no table of contents, no data segmentation, it will be difficult for me to pull up that exact page, right? And hence, as I mentioned, data segmentation or classification is being used by you and me on a daily basis. It's just that we haven't thought through in that particular way. And these were the real life segmentations. These segmentations have been transformed to the virtual world as well. Virtual world is your ERPs where you basically enter your transactions. Those transactions are segregated based upon these data segmentation tools of subsidiary, department, classes, and locations, right? And based upon these data segmentation tools, your data is segmented and you can pull up the exact data that you require at any point in time, as you could pull up the exact page number from a book that is being handed over to you. Okay. Now let's get back to the classifications that are available inside NetSuite. Any questions you have until now?
Yeah, no, I don't know. I'm still with you. I still understand. So
you're following, or I need to slow down, or I need to change
no,
the
no,
word
no,
of
no, no,
framing?
no. I'm
Let me know.
following. I am following. You don't need to slow
Okay.
down at this point.
Okay, fine. Okay, so then subsidiaries. So if you click on subsidiaries here, it will give you a list of entities that have been created in the system, right? And if you click on new, it will basically open up a page to create a new subsidiary inside NetSuite. As I mentioned, subsidiaries are different legal entities which belongs to a specific company. So if we have sold NetSuite to Apple, then Apple will create all their different legal entities that they have in United States as well as across the entire globe here on this particular page, which is called to a subsidiary, where you can create a subsidiary. And once you create those subsidiaries, it will be listed here accordingly, right? So for example, we have Huffman Manufacturing here, then we have Huffman Inc. Under Huffman Inc. you have Canada and Elimination, then you have Australia and New Zealand. So Australia, New Zealand, and elimination. Then you have EMEA, which consists of United Kingdom and any additional subsidiaries. So you could create the entire subsidiary structure here, the entire tree of an organization, right? So it basically, you could create the parent-child relationships here. So Huffman Inc. is a parent organization which holds Canada and these additional subsidiaries. Similarly, if you could have read a news a day ago that the Google CEO, right, Mr. Sundar Pichai, is now the CEO of Alphabet, right? Alphabet is a parent company to Google. And now the Sundar Pichai is basically replacing Larry Page, who was the earlier CEO of Alphabet. So when we say parent and child, this is how those are configured. So for example, this is Alphabet, and under Alphabet, there is Google Inc. Right? So this is how your parent-child relationships are maintained, and your hierarchies are also established accordingly. So child organization will always report to a parent organization, right? The data that belongs to child organization is always consolidated into the parent organization, because when someone has to look at the sales of Google, right, they will basically refer the child organization. But when someone has to look how Alphabet as a group is performing, they will look at the data which belongs to Alphabet, which will have transactions related to Alphabet and transactions related to Google as well, because Google is their child organization. So every data that is being collected under Google is also consolidated while preparing reports for Alphabet as well. Right, so that is how these parent-child relationships are maintained. This basically really depends upon how your company structure has been basically made, and how you basically have established your legal entities. If we want to see the structure in a graphical format, let me just see if this has the Subsidy Navigator, and I could show you that as well. Just a moment. It has the Subsidy Navigator, yes. Why is it coming blank? Yeah, it is loading up. So see this. So this is how the subsidiary tree would look like. So there is Huffman Inc. at the top. Under Huffman Inc., you have ANZ, you have EMEA, and you have Canada, Huffman Manufacturing, and an elimination. And then under ANZ, you have Australia, you have New Zealand, and an elimination. Under EMEA, you have United Kingdom, you have elimination, right? So this is how the subsidiary structure has been designed in this particular instance. Similarly, all your corporations and organizations have their own subsidiary structures which are configured in this system accordingly. And the configuration page is basically here, where you see the list of all your subsidiaries, and this is the page where you create a new subsidiary. Now, what all is required for you to generate a new subsidiary in Netsuite is basically the name of the organizations. For example, Google Inc. is the name, and sub-subsidiary of, so here Huffman Inc. is mentioned, but in case of Google, it will be mentioned Alphabet, for example, right? Then the logos, every company has their own logo, right? Logo is the identity of any organization. You see here also a logo is being mentioned for Huffman, for example, right? So you select the logos here. If you have a website, you will basically mention the website. The most important things, any field that you see inside NetSuite which has a star sign associated to it are mandatory fields. You cannot save this if you have not filled in any of these fields where there is a star mark basically mentioned, right? So then you select the country in which this entity is basically operating, and then you select the state province associated to that country. So right now United States is selected, hence I could see the states and provinces belonging to the United States of America. If I change it to say United Kingdom, for example, and the state province basically will change according to the country which I've selected. So I suppose you also are belonging to United Kingdom, right?
Yes.
And from which part of the kingdom basically?
In London.
Oh, you're based out of London. Great. Okay. So you will basically select the country and the state and province. The legal names, most probably it happens that companies have a legal name and a name as well. Name is more from a branding perspective, right? And the legal name will be as per the legal conditions that are required by each and every country. So, for example, if we take up Food Panda is a name more from a branding perspective, but the name that is there at the back end, which is legally registered name, is different for that organization, for example. Right. So this is the case with many of these organizations where there is a very catchy and very a name which is generated for branding purposes, and then
Yeah.
it also has a name as per the legal requirements as well. And hence, NetSuite allows you to have two names here. One is the name which is basically known to the entire general public of what this company is, and one which is as per your legal requirements, for example, right? Then certain communication information such as what is the return email address, what is the fax. Now fax have almost vanished from the face of the earth, but still NetSuite, I mean US has certain states where fax is still important, and hence this kind of information is still there in NetSuite. We presume that in the coming years, uh, newer and newer versions of communication and the details associated to it will be captured rather than something which is a fax which is not being used uh, that extensively at this era of doing business. Then the language, NetSuite comes in multiple languages. So certain countries have language restrictions. For example, if you go to China, you will not find anything in English. They will have to have their local language, which is the Chinese one. Similarly, if you go to Japan, they have their own language. You will not find softwares operating in English there as well. So NetSuite basically, as I mentioned, that you could basically create all your legal entities spread across the globe in one software. So they also have to make sure that these languages are covered as well. Similar cases with Germany. If you go to Germany, all the software has to be in local languages as well. So as I mentioned, subsidiary is a very powerful tool. So if you create a subsidiary in United Kingdom, you could have English UK as the language. If you are creating it in United States, you can have English US as the language. Similarly, if you have companies established in UK, US, and Germany, so you will create those subsidiaries, three subsidiaries in the system: UK, US, and Germany. All employees belonging to UK and US will see English as per UK, US, as per English US and English UK. People working from Germany who are associated with that German organization or company, which is your child company, once they log in into NetSuite, they will see the entire instance of NetSuite in the German language. So that's the beauty. All three employees, consider yourself as one of the employees working from UK, one more employee working from US, and one more employee working from Germany. All these three employees are working for Apple Inc. and Apple has different subsidiaries created in US, UK, and Germany. So you three logging in at the same time in the same software, but you three are looking at different data sets. First of all, you are looking at the data belonging to UK, someone at the US, and someone at Germany. At the same time, you are also looking at the same instance, but you are looking at an instance which is giving you English UK. Someone is looking at English US, and at the same time, someone is looking into the software with the German language as well. Right. So here you basically select the country, you select the language in which you want NetSuite to be shown. Fiscal calendars are important. Fiscal calendars are something which every country has their own set of 12 months considered as a fiscal calendar. Fiscal calendar is nothing but, you must have heard this terminology, that this is the fiscal year end, right? That
Yeah.
December marks 31st December marks the fiscal year end. We need to submit all the year end reports.
Yeah.
All your sales figures will be analyzed, all your targets will be analyzed, how well we have performed in this year compared to last year, for example, and what will be targets for the next year based upon the targets that were achieved in this current year. So you must have heard all these terminologies in and around every time when someone discusses certain accounting facts or certain targets or certain sales figures. So fiscal calendar is something which basically defines your financial year, right? So in most of the countries, the financial year of the fiscal calendar is January to December. That is the calendar that is followed. In India, it is April to March. So our calendar year is January to December, right? But our financial year is April to March. So 1st April marks the first day of a financial year, whereas 31st March marks the last day of a financial year. On this financial year, April to March, at the end of the March, we need to submit our reports to the government and also need to pay taxes accordingly. Whereas a country who has a financial year from Jan to December will basically submit the reports after 31st December. Once they finalize everything, they will submit the reports to the government, and then they will pay taxes or take rebates accordingly. So as I constantly mention, subsidy is a very powerful tool. Now you imagine Apple doing business in US and in India as well. So in US, their books will close on 31st December, but in India, the books will close on 31st March, because that is the financial year that is followed by India, right? And Netsuite is capable enough to follow all these guidelines as well. You can close US books of accounts on 31st December, but the books for India will still be open until the 31st March arrives, based upon which you will close the books, and then you would go ahead and file your returns with the local authorities. So that's how, while Netsuite considered to build a product which is called One World, which will cater to the entire world. You can have, as I mentioned, all countries and all companies and all different types of business mapped in one single software. It has considered all these factors of language, country, fiscal calendars, financial years, so on and so forth. So more or less, fiscal calendar and tax fiscal years are the same. So if it's standard, it is standard. So Australia also has a different fiscal calendar that I could see once I look in the drop down. And you could basically select what is your fiscal calendar, similarly your tax fiscal calendar, and your currency, the currency in which that particular company operates. So for example, again, we go back to Apple. Once Apple is created, Apple has established its company in the US, the subsidiary will be USD. Once they come to UK, your currency would be United GBP or Euro, whatever basically
It's
they
GBP
establish
at the
into.
moment.
It's,
We're not going
yeah,
into
it's GBP. Yeah. So it really depends on how they get their company registered, and then the currency is selected. They come to India, they select Indian rupee. They go to Dubai, they select dirhams, right? So really depends upon which country I'm doing business, right? What language is preferred in that particular country? What are the fiscal financial calendars followed in that country? And what is the currency that is followed as well? And then, depending upon the country that you select, the tax registration numbers, every company needs to be registered with the government, and that government issues a specific tax ID for that organization. In US, it is called tax ID. In UK, I could see a VAT registration number. In India, if you come, it is a GST number, goods and services tax. So it really depends upon which country you are registered. Based upon the country that you select, this particular field is updated as well, whether it's a VAT registration number, whether it's a tax ID, or whether it is a GST number as well. So if you fill out all this information, you also put in the registered address. Every company needs to have a registered office and a registered address as well. And hence, Netsuite also gives you the option to fill out the addresses here. And sorry. And these addresses will be used on all your print layouts and transactions in case required. Okay. Okay. So this is the way you will fill out the entire information here. And once you click on save, once all your mandatory fields are filled out, right? And once you click on save, Netsuite will go ahead and create a subsidiary inside the system. Now I can open up any of these subsidiaries which are already created, which will have the information as well. So just to have a look and feel of how the data is filled out, and how it has been configured. So you see the name as Australia here. It is the child subsidiary of Hoffman Inc. Sorry, is it? Okay. Then logos are not attached here, but you could attach the logos of that organization. You could put in the website as well. It states that the country is Australia. The province that it belongs to is New South Wales. And you see the legal name as Huffman Manufacturing Australia. So maybe for branding purposes, the name is Australia, but the legal name registered with the authorities is Huffman Manufacturing Australia. Put in the return email address, the fax numbers, the language that they have selected is English US. The calendar that they have selected is specific to their local requirements, which is Australian fiscal calendar. The currency that they have selected is Australian dollar. And accordingly, the edition has been populated by Netsuite, which is AU. At the same time, some addresses are mentioned here as well. There is address, registered address of Australia, level 13, Alfred Street, News, North Sydney, NSW something. There's a shipping address as well, and there's a return address as well, because you might have, warehouses and locations inside Australia, which, for example, if I am selling something, this is my shipping address from where I'm going to dispatch goods. If the customer wants to return something to us, this is the return address. I might have a warehouse which is completely different to take up the returns from the customers or the defective materials as well. So you could have your address, shipping address, and return address configured in the system as well.